Greetings, it is International Pet Day today, and I'm participating in a collab that was hosted over on Lana's Discord. And I will talk about all of the artists involved in that in a moment. But first, the subject I'm painting today is my partner's dog, Bella. Bella is a rescue. We're not sure exactly how old she is because she was rescued, but she is around 10 or 11 years old. And I ended up joining her life once I met my partner. She is who I'm going to be painting today. So what you just saw in my sketchbook was some of the prep work for the painting. I did two things in there. I did a rough sketch to figure out the placement of her on the page, the angle I wanted her head to be in, and also figure out some things like the perspective, her likeness, and things like that. And another thing is I did a really tiny thumbnail to roughly figure out the value composition of the painting. So I split the values into four, and you'll have seen annotations for those on that thumbnail. So L1, L2, and then I think it was D1 and D2. So L1 and D1 are the lightest lights for L1 and the darkest darks for D1. And those are on Bella herself because I want the most contrast on her. So the lightest lights are all going to be grouped around her left side when we're looking at her. And all of the darkest darks are going to be grouped on her right side as we're looking at her. And then there's also going to be some very light white details across both of them later on when I'm doing things like the whiskers, which again adds to that contrast and pulls the eye there. And then I also planned out L2 and D2, which are the lights and darks that are not as light as the lightest lights and not as dark as the darkest darks. And those are for the background. And the plan was to have a slightly light colour close to the dark of her face and a slightly dark colour in the background close to her lightest areas. So that meant that the background would shift from light to dark depending on how light or dark Bella is next to it. And you can do different things with that. You can either place dark backgrounds next to dark parts of the subject to create lost edges, or you can do the opposite like I did with this, which ends up defining the areas a little bit more. So that was the approach I did with this. Before I continue with talking about the process and the dog herself, I want to share with you the artists participating in this collab. We have, of course, Lana. It is her Discord that we organised this on, and she is the host of this. So Lana is a wonderful human being, and she has a YouTube channel where she shares all of her processes but also does a lot of tutorials. She also tends to do her tutorials with a student brand of watercolour to make them a lot more accessible to beginners, which shows you a more realistic result for what you might end up having available to you. But she is a wonderful artist who primarily works in watercolours and gouache, who does animals and landscapes. And one of the things that she's been doing in recent months is tiny landscapes and tiny animals, and it is amazing. She's managing to do these tiny watercolour paintings on only like a few centimetres squared. It's insane. It's very impressive what she manages to do with those, and I really recommend that you go check out her stuff. Next up, we have Dan, who is a wonderful traditional artist who primarily does botanicals and animals. He also hand molds and hand makes his own watercolour paint for sale. So if you're interested in looking at some artisanal watercolour paints to potentially add to your collection, I really recommend checking out what he's up to and the limited edition watercolours he's currently working on. I'll leave every artist that I'm talking about in the description and any corresponding links to either what they're doing for this collab or any links to their social media as well in the description. Next up, we have Yuri. Yuri is only participating on the Discord as far as I know, but if that is any different, then I will leave further information in the description. And they are doing a painting of their horses, I believe, which is going to be very interesting because I think that they're the only ones doing horses. We also have Cyane. Cyane is a wonderful artist and illustrator who loves illustrating bunnies. She's over here on YouTube, and you can also find her on Instagram and everything as well. Again, I'll leave all the information below. She works in multiple mediums. You'll see that she has a particular affinity for watercolours and fountain pens. And that is everyone participating this time. It's usually a different group of faces every time, with a few similar faces popping up every now and again. But this brings us back to Bella. So as you can see at the moment, I'm laying in the first big shadow shape on her darkest dark side. And I've also laid in a lot of the groundwork for the lightest light side and starting to build up the fur textures on her. And I did something a little bit different this time. You can see me putting in the background already, and that was because I felt like I wanted to get that down after establishing the area of the lightest light and the area of the darkest dark. I wanted to get that in. So you can see in this how I have put a lighter green next to the shadows on her face, and then a slightly darker green next to the lightest areas on her left side to us. And that's what I was mentioning earlier about planning that L1, L2, D1, D2. That's what this is in action. And after establishing that background, it enabled me to sort of see my values a little bit easier, because then I had the whole page covered in tone at that point. And that meant that I could really figure out the darkest darks that I needed to put down in areas such as her eyes and also on her nostrils, but then also figure out if I needed to darken up any other areas, which I did end up doing around her mouth. There were two areas on her portrait that I wanted to focus the majority of that light to dark contrast and also the detail, and that was the left eye to us and her like nose and mouth area. And so that was where I wanted to pay a lot of attention to making sure that I had a really nice contrast of light and very dark dark. And I did notice that on Bella, she has, even though she is a very pale dog, she's got a lot of potentially yellow lab in her, but she is a mix, so we're not sure exactly what is in there. But she has a lot of like lovely cream and then also these very, very pale ginger tones in her. But around her mouth and under her nose, she has a lot of very dark grey going on in there, especially when her nose is in shadow, like it is in this. And so I wanted to really grab onto that and use it for that contrast in this painting. She also has a lot of like black and brown spots on her nose. It's really interesting when you choose to paint one of your pets, because you start noticing really small details about them. You'll know a lot of details about your pets, right? You'll know that they have this particular spot on their back or whatever. Like Peanut, she has a little patch of white on her neck, and those stand out to you, right? But it's really interesting really observing your pets when you paint them, and you just start to notice even just like the slightly very small details about them that you might not have necessarily noticed before. And I really noticed that in her nose when I was painting her for this. Now you're seeing me adding the final details, and I went back to some real-time footage of this just so that you could see what it was like painting the whiskers and the details in real time. I'm using gouache for this rather than masking the watercolors from the start. When it's really fine details like this, I do generally just prefer using gouache towards the end. And I'm using titanium white gouache by Winsor & Newton. It's the same tube I've been using for years at this point. It's still going strong. Bella is a really sweet dog. She is more of an alarm bell dog, so she lets you know if there's someone around that she does not know. And as soon as she knows a person, she ends up being very enthusiastic about requesting cuddles from them. And she's one of those dogs that thinks that she's a lap dog, but she is not a lap dog size. But she's lovely and sweet, and she constantly asks me for belly scratches. She'll do a thing where she puts her paw on my leg, one of her forepaws on my leg, and that's basically a sign of like, why aren't you petting me? You should be petting me. And she's really, really sweet. She's terrified of storms though, and when there's ever been a really bad thunderstorm, she does sometimes run into our room and either hides in the closet, or she has also come up to our bed before and asked to be calmed down. So there was a really bad storm we had once where all of the pets came into our room to request assistance. Basically, Peanut kind of just came in the room because she was just interested in what everyone was doing. Peanut didn't really care about what was going on, but she was just like, "Ooh, family gathering." But yeah, Bella, bless her, was not feeling the storm. I never got to witness this, but I've heard my mother-in-law tell me a really cute story about how Bella had a deer as a friend, a wild deer that used to wander into the back garden and play with Bella. And they used to like chase each other. Even the deer would chase Bella, and then Bella would chase the deer, and then the deer would chase Bella, and the deer kept coming back for multiple days to play with Bella, and that was a really cute story. I really wish I'd been able to see it because that sounds so sweet. Um, but yeah, that is a little bit about Bella and what she is like. As I mentioned earlier, if you'd like to hear more about some different pets and animals and their lovely stories and all that cuteness, then check out what the other artists in this collab have posted. I know that at least a couple people are planning on YouTube videos, so I'll leave anything that they post in the description of this video. But please also feel welcome to share about your pets as well, because every pet and every animal has just a massive character of their own, and oftentimes there's some really cute or funny stories to tell about them, so please feel free to do that in the comments. I'm currently doing the tape peel at the moment, but there will be the reveal of the painting now. Thank you for watching. I hope this was a fun little painting for you to watch along to, and I will see you next time. Bye!